again, everybody. Happy Friday. We made it through another week. How's everybody doing today?
Doing good.
Awesome.
Happy it's Friday.
Welcome, Yev. Welcome, Logan.
Doing
Josh
good
is
is a great
behind the
name.
Opolis account today. Thank you, Josh, so much for hosting this. And I'm really excited today to jump into some freelancer education on how to run your own business. So about a week or so ago, we actually did a poll to see what the community wants to learn more of. So on these spaces, we really want to try to harness the education and just continue building community and empowering people with the tools that they need to thrive as an independent, self-sovereign worker. So my name is Rachel. I am a coalition success steward at Opolis and working on nurturing partnerships in the Web3 space. I'm joined today by Joshua, one of the founding stewards of Opolis, Loge, the owner of Loge Media, and Yevi, who is a legal steward of Opolis and running Launch Legal. I'll pass the mic over to Josh to do an introduction.
Thanks, Rachel. I'd also want to add that Yev is a member of the Employment Commons Board of Stewards, which is an awesome board. I'm Joshua, 0x Joshua, which I'd normally be here in the space, but I'm on the Opolis account today. One of the founding stewards. My just story briefly. A lot of you are repeats, so I don't want to go too deep into it. I was at Lyft, the Consensus, lost my job at Consensus, went to Denver to find a job, found one at Opolis, was the first member of the Employment Commons, and I also have the first referral of the Employment Commons, Bill Warren, who's also a steward. So Opolis Invoice 1 and 2. Been here for almost 3 years. I'm going to hand it over to Loge.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. Really glad to be here.
Awesome. Appreciate you joining today, Loge. And I'm really excited to dive in and just talk about your journey as an entrepreneur, kind of the things that you've learned through trial and error, through running a business. And yeah, really excited to dive in on some of the questions we have prepared for today. And I'll pass the mic over to Yev to do an introduction.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I am a lawyer based out of Denver, Colorado. And my firm is called Launch Legal. It's a boutique corporate and securities firm that heavily concentrates in Web3. We started in about 2016, ran into, and also of counsel at Jason Weiner PC, which is a Boulder firm. And we do a lot of work with co-ops and DAO co-ops and have been doing so since about 2019, which is when I ran into John Poller at Consensus in New York. And he was kind of like, hey, you're from Denver. Why don't I know you? And I was like, well, why don't I know you? And that's the magical story of how we we stumbled upon working together and really putting in a lot of effort, a lot of hours into concocting the Employment Commons to what it is today, which is a freelancer public good infrastructure that is rooted in the Colorado Co-op statute and is working towards progressive decentralization to be run as a DAO by its members and giving all of the members cooperative membership perks like patronage. So that is my story. And I continue to work in the Web3 space and really have enjoyed seeing it mature, and I'm still very nervous about all of the gray areas and not being able to provide direct answers, but also, appreciate that creates an environment for a lot of creativity and supports builders in this space. So that was a long-winded introduction, but that's a little bit about me.
One of my favorite things, and this is a answer that lawyers give often, and we've talked about this before, but the most common correct answer to nearly every question in existence is it depends.
That is spot on. So that is the common answer, but on kind of flipping the tables, one of the most common comments that I get is, I'm not a lawyer, but, And I feel like I need to get a t-shirt that says that. But everybody, obviously wants to kind of put in their two
I can
cents
think of a few
on
people
legal
who should
issues.
be wearing that t-shirt.
Hey, I actually was in talks actually today with a fashion designer. I don't know if you guys know Lil Fresh Sam. She was working at MCon 2 with Meta Factory. I'm actually working on getting some custom swag and custom merch made for ETH Denver. So yeah, maybe we could make a shirt like that for you.
I would very much appreciate one of those. The senior counsel at Launch Legal, David Cruz, he needs a shirt that says, not my circus, not my monkeys.
Awesome. So today I have some questions prepared. I really wanted to just kind of adjust and give the community what they're asking for, which is to learn more education on how to run their own business. So really, I brought up these speakers today, Loj, Yevi, and Joshua. You guys have extensive experience with running your own businesses, on the legal and compliance side of things, just super knowledgeable. So I will just start out with Logan. I have some questions prepared today. And I guess I'll start with Logan. What was your inspiration for starting your own business, for starting Loj Media?
Yeah, thank you again for having me up and having me talk today. I'm really excited to kind of jump into this. Just a little background on Loge Media to let people know is we're a one-stop shop for everything digitally creative within the internet. Basically, we started doing photography. You said, what was the inspiration? It was, just because I liked photography, and that was really what kind of got us going. But along with that, we got like kind of our big break with like wedding photography. I think that's where a lot of people kind of start out. And really what got me interested in starting my own like LLC and my own company was the fact that someone kind of nudged me along. I worked alongside another person, and they realized how much money that they were paying me throughout the year for the work that I was giving them, and they said, "You should really consider just starting your own company," And I was like, okay. And so, I mean, I had been doing, just like some jobs for myself, but mainly like whenever I got that encouragement from someone else to be like, you should do this, I really started to kind of figure it out and understand it a little bit for myself. And like I said, it started with photography. It wasn't always just right there. We've now expanded into video and now graphic design and web design as well. And so ultimately, it was just that idea for growth is what got me started in my own business.
So it really just stemmed from a passion that you have and something that you wanted to turn into a business.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I went to school for photography, so that was like my I graduated with like a associates in applied science and portrait photography, and then went back for an applied science in commercial photography. And so, I already had kind of like a knack for like doing the the digital work, doing the creative part of what I do, but I had never really had an interest in like, okay, let's figure out the numbers. Let's go through the
Everyone's favorite part.
let's go yeah, let's do contracts. Let's do all the email and all the marketing and all that stuff. I never really kind of had that as like my initial idea, and kind of why I worked under the wing of someone for someone else for as long as I did. And so yeah, I always had like the side jobs and like the odd things here and there. People would ask me for help, but it never really became a business until I started kind of adding on to just the photography element of what I did.
Awesome. So this one's probably going to be an open-ended question that you can, provide your answer with. What things have you learned through trial and error as a business owner through running Loge Media?
Oh gosh, trial and error is my life, right? I mean, that is that is the way like that that we grow. I mean, so trial and error, like wow. We we tried last year, just take it to like a personal story real quick. We tried last year to extend out of just the video realm of what we do and go into more of a live streaming element. And we decided to contact a local hospital and ask them if we could do live streaming. And so we actually got the opportunity to do a 23 episode live stream with a hospital. And for Southern Ohio, that is like completely out of the blue. Like just beside we were beside ourselves that we even could do it. And through that, we really learned like, okay, we have these, skill sets and we can do these jobs, but ultimately like they have to be sustainable, right? So I say that's the error. Like the trial was getting out and doing it, making sure like we could do it. But then the error in that is like, okay, but is this sustainable? Is this something that's gonna have longevity? Because man, you that's what you want in life, right?
Yeah.
You want something you can continue doing. So
That's so
so
true,
yeah,
man. To continuously be adjusting and also being mindful of product market fit, right? And something we discussed on a call earlier, Logan, is like adding skills and adjusting and adding services, just constantly improving your business to meet the client's needs or whatever product market fit you're in. Now, the next question I have, so this is something I'd like to open up because I think a lot of speakers today could provide some insight on this. So what kind of things have you all learned in the world of bookkeeping and record keeping for your company? Why is this so important for business owners to keep in mind?
I could probably let someone else go first if they wanted to with this one. Feel free to take the mic at any moment. But I know for myself, um, bookkeeping was something early on that I had to do because it was just out of necessity. It's like you don't really know if you're growing unless you track it properly, right? And so you can never really tell if you're succeeding or not if you're not doing the record keeping and looking at the profit and loss and checking all of those boxes to make sure that you're compliant, things are looking good. That was something that was especially true whenever the times were good. And so like I would say like a bookkeeper is important even for the good times, not just for the bad times, right?
Yeah, totally.
And so yeah, I mean, um, we had a great year like 2021. So like I'd make sure like, okay, I've got a bookkeeper, I've got someone tracking this alongside me, and someone that I could have a good rapport with. I could ask him questions randomly. I could get a hold of him on just like a weekend and ask him questions. So that way it's something that you're just kind of like maintenance for your car. You're constantly getting an oil change, you're constantly rotating your tires. You make sure that engine's still running good.
Yeah, and I just want to give the other speakers an opportunity to chime in here. Josh and Yev, what have you both learned in the world of bookkeeping and record keeping and why this is so important for business owners?
Okay, so I'll chime in for a bit. I mean, for lawyers, it's a little bit different because we have trust accounts where we store advanced retainer funds that haven't been earned. And so bookkeeping is incredibly vital. And if you don't properly maintain your books, um, you can be subject to a grievance or an ethics violation and potentially even lose your license if you commingle client trust funds with your operating funds. So bookkeeping is something that I don't do very well, and I have somebody that runs the books for the law firm just to be very, very squeaky clean with that aspect of compliance.
Awesome. Thanks, Yev. Josh, do you have anything you'd like to add on bookkeeping and record keeping?
Yeah, I would say that the one thing that Opos is really helpful for is getting people to stop treating their like business or sole prop like a piggy bank. And I know that I was definitely guilty of this, where you've got this business account and then you're like, oh, okay, this is just the credit card I have handy. I'll figure out if it's a business expense or personal expense later. Or you're using your personal card to pay for business expenses and then you're trying this reimbursement crap. Like, there should be a very hard line between this is a business expense and that is a personal expense. And just having Opolis naturally improves you, like without even you having to do work, it just naturally creates this barrier because now you've got business money going into an account that you have to make sure there's enough money in there for to pay your invoice, your payroll. And then you've got your personal side where you're, paying for expenses and daily whatever that are not business related that are coming off of a different set of books. So like, yes, you're keeping 2 sets of books, but you're making your life so much easier in the long run, especially come April.
Yeah, it's so true. And one of the first things I really acknowledged about Opolis when I joined is that we have a bookkeeping software built into the member dashboard. And I just think that's so awesome to offer for entrepreneurs, especially people working in crypto and Web3. Like compliance is so important, tax compliance, bookkeeping, making sure you're up to date with all these things for your business. And while we're talking about legal and compliance, oh, go ahead, Logan. I see your hands up.
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback on what you said about kind of being paid in crypto because we had the opportunity last year. I personally did to jump in front of the camera instead of being behind the camera and behind the scenes so much, and we were able to do community marketing videos for a cryptocurrency organization, and we were paid in crypto. And so part of that, confusion is being paid in dollars and paid in crypto and paid in another asset, and so I would say that Opolis, definitely has the tools to help make that work, right?
Yeah, definitely. And it's something that, a lot of people that are joining these spaces have heard my story and why Opolis has helped me so much. Earning in a cryptocurrency, it's like, okay, how do I off ramp this asset? How do I get a W-2, pay stubs, benefits? Like Opolis really helped me with all of those things personally. And I think it's so important when you're earning to ensure you're compliant. And while we're talking on compliance, and we had Yev speaking for a moment about just the legal side of running a business, I actually have an impromptu question from one of the audience members. So I was asked by Jeremy on our team. He was wondering for Yev, considering the uncertain legal environment in Web3, are there general recommendations you would make for people or smaller organizations starting out? And Jeremy also says, for instance, can you give us general pitfalls in entity, LLC, corporate creation, contracts, legal counsel, and concerns when acting internationally? And sorry, that's a mouthful.
That is a big question. It's pretty big. I'll try to break that down.
So I guess an easier way to phrase that would be, considering the uncertain legal environment in Web3, are there general recommendations you would make for people or smaller groups just starting out?
Yeah, so the number one recommendation is to wrap yourself, even as an individual freelancer, or service provider or a contributor to a DAO, to wrap yourself in a legal entity and not a sole proprietorship. So the easiest legal entity is the LLC. You can choose to form it in the state where you're located and where you're doing business, or you've got the power to choose another state that has maybe potentially more favorable LLC laws. So two examples that are commonly used are Delaware and Wyoming. My personal favorite is Wyoming for LLC protection. You have certain aspects in terms of privacy and asset protection and charging orders from creditors that only attach kind of at the top level of your membership interest. And I apologize if maybe this is too technical for anybody, but please feel free to ask further questions. But yeah, so Wyoming just has a bundle of protections that are favorable for LLCs. It's super easy to set up and very inexpensive. The only thing is that you need to use a registered agent in that state or in the Wyoming to set up your LLC and pay kind of an annual fee to that registered agent. It's usually around $100. Whereas, for example, in Colorado, where I'm located, I could set up an LLC on my own through the Secretary of State within minutes, and it's $50, and I can use myself as a registered agent. But unfortunately, Colorado's LLC laws aren't quite as robust as those in Wyoming. And just as a general disclaimer, with kind of that sentiment of lawyers always say it depends, lawyers always also say that they're not providing legal advice. So please don't take any of this as legal advice and consult with your own lawyer and your own tax advisors on anything that's shared today. So
That's just like
Yeah.
Yev is a lawyer, but Yev is not your lawyer.
that's right.
Definitely good to incorporate that, Josh. And yeah, like none of this is financial advice or legal advice. This is just simply for educational purposes to help, educate the attendees more on how to run your own business. So thanks for clarifying that, Yev. And something you were mentioning is just kind of like the differences in different states with running your own business, like you were discussing Wyoming and Colorado. So from a jurisdiction standpoint, like what are the differences from state to state and city to city in running your own business?
It's kind of difficult to paint a broad brushstroke in giving, any advice on that. I would just say again, you can either choose to form your entity or incorporate your entity, either in the state that you're located or one of these other states, like whichever state you choose, really, will honor your incorporation or formation. But it doesn't necessarily vary from city to city. It's more at the state to state level. And then kind of the added layer for consideration is taxation, which is at the federal level. So you could have an LLC, for example, that's taxed as an S corp, and primarily that's how the employment commons are structured, where you become an employee member of the co-op by virtue of setting up an LLC that has a single employee member and that is taxed as an S corp. But S corps can be corporations as well. So it gets a little bit confusing. Try not to kind of overly complicate things, but essentially you can choose how you're taxed, which is separate to your entity structure. So even if you have a co-op, you can choose to be taxed as a corporation, as a pass-through partnership, and the IRS just requires a form for you to fill out and kind of designate yourself as a particular type of taxable status. So, and then just briefly running through the different kinds of entities. So sole proprietorships are probably the easiest entity type because there's no structure, there's no employees, you don't need to register with the IRS. You can use your Social Security as the business tax ID. However, proprietors can't pay themselves wages, but they're subject to federal income tax and Social Security and Medicare tax, which are called FICA. So a lot of sole proprietors don't kind of estimate that into their tax obligations and end up owning more FICA taxes than actual income taxes. Again, something to talk to your CPA or tax advisor about if you operate in this way. So these are really easy because they're kind of passed through on your end of year taxes. But the big word of caution there is that you don't have limited liability protection with a sole proprietorship. So potentially your personal assets, like your bank account, your car, your house, your computer, whatever it is, can be subject to a creditor coming in and putting a lien or trying to have that liquidated if you owe somebody money. So you don't have this corporate veil of protection that you have in another legal entity like an LLC or a corporation. And kind of some high level differences between S corps and C corps, or similarities between S corps and C corps are that they're both corporate entities, and there is a kind of degree of separation between the shareholder and the actual entity. So you have limited liability protection, which is a huge benefit, so that you're not personally responsible for debts or any other kind of liabilities connected with the business. You do have, some more corporate formalities that are required, like bylaws and shareholder meetings and annual tax filings for both of those types of entities. And then there's this more kind of hierarchical structure in corporations with shareholders, directors, and officers. Some of the differences between S corps and C corps are S corps are generally pass through. So again, the income tax is not paid at the corporation level, but is passed through to the owners. C corps essentially get double taxed. So the corporation pays taxes, and then any kind of distributions are also taxed at the shareholder level. With S corps, you can't have any more than 100 shareholders. All of those shareholders have to be natural persons and U.S. citizens or residents. With C corps, there aren't any kind of restrictions with unlimited shareholders. And then S corps have one class of stock, so you can't have common stock and a preferred stock and voting stock and non-voting stock, whereas C corps generally allow for different kinds of classes of stocks. Some of the benefits of S corps are, again, that taxation, that you don't have to pay taxes twice, and then you can also write off losses. So any kind of business losses can be passed through, and I think that's primarily it. So hopefully that was helpful.
Awesome. Yeah, you seriously have just provided a wealth of knowledge for us today. And I just appreciate you joining and sharing this with all the attendees today. I'm actually receiving some other impromptu questions. So one of the audience members asked, does it incorporating in a different state cause additional filings? And he also asked, why would I incorporate in Wyoming when I live in California? And just asking the differences between fees and incorporating in different states.
Yeah, it's a great question. So if you have a nexus to another state, I mean, for example, you form your entity in Wyoming, but you're actually doing business in California. You have a business address, a bank account, whatever it is, and there's a test basically that you could meet to establish that business nexus, which would guide you in making a determination whether you'd have to set up or whether you'd have to register as a foreign entity there as well. So technically, if you meet kind of those nexus requirements, you potentially have to register in that separate state as well. And so that does create kind of additional filings, additional expenses, but there may be, depending on how your lawyer advises you or the nature of your business, and if you're really operating at the kind of virtual layer, then potentially you can establish that you don't have that nexus. And Wyoming, again, like I mentioned, has preferable. California is just a sticky state. So if you are located in California, there's so many things there that you need to be
Oh,
wary of.
I
So
know.
even if you issue yourself stock, if you bring in capital, there are all of these additional filings that need to be filed in California that don't in other states. So that's a particularly hairy one that you need a California attorney to advise you on. But again, Wyoming just has LLC protections, or kind of entity protections, not even touching the Dow LLC law, but just straight. Wyoming was the first state to roll out the LLC. So they have really, really fantastic protections. Again, as far as privacy, as far as asset protection, as far as creditors that other LLC laws don't bear.
So before circling back to some of the other speakers, one last question I have on just the legalities of running a business. As far as protecting your organization, would you be able to touch on 1099s and income reporting? And what are some things to watch out for regarding best practices here and limitations of liability?
So if you are a freelancer or independent contractor, it is up to you to obtain a 1099 from the company or the other side. What we've seen in the last couple of years, particularly in the DAO space and on Web3 companies, is that they're not issuing 1099s and are not asking for W9s. And this is potentially going to be a huge landmine this year, the federal level, because the IRS is really kind of beefing up their investigations on tax evasion. And I think Josh has a good quote on this that maybe he'll share. But I would just say that to be diligent and to know that, potentially if you don't report your income or wages, that can come back and bite you, and you can be responsible for income taxes and also these FICA taxes that I mentioned earlier on Social Security and Medicare.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Yev. And I'll pass it over to Josh just to discuss any, historical figures who have dealt with tax evasion and the penalties that come with that.
Are you guys talking about Martha Stewart?
No, actually, I know at our workshop in San Francisco when we were talking to the attendees, you had mentioned Al Capone.
Yeah, no, I was making a joke. Yeah, I guess we could talk about Al Capone. It's usually more of a call and response, and since I think all of the actually this is for Loge because he's the only one who can respond who hasn't heard me say this before. But so Al Capone, super famous guy, one of my favorite Chicagoans in history, really. A body count of over 400, and for the Zoomers in the room, that's like deaths, not sex. Prostitution, racketeering, selling alcohol during the Prohibition. Fun fact about my personal life, my great uncle was actually arrested for selling alcohol during the Prohibition out of his fruit store in a small town outside Chicago. Part of the crime family. Do you know what he went to jail for, Loge?
I don't know. I was going to guess, but no, I have no clue.
No, it's okay. It was none of the crimes that I just listed. It was tax evasion, because as long as the government gets their cut, you can do whatever you want. That is not crime advice. Do not go commit crimes, but also pay your taxes.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Josh. So I want to tie back in just some of the things that you and Yev had discussed. I know you had recently done an unemployable podcast with Yev and discussed some of these concepts we're talking about. So if you guys want to do a recap and kind of talk about what you had touched on the unemployable podcast, feel free.
No, absolutely not. Go watch the show. Give me some likes, subscribes, and some watches.
Unemployable.
Obviously you can say whatever you want. If there's a highlight from there that you'd like to talk about.
Yeah, I think we touched upon some of the highlights about protecting yourself as a freelancer, as a DAO participant, as a Web3 participant. Generally, I think, I don't think lawyers should be gatekeepers. And now with the advent of ChatGPT, which lawyers are relying on as well, incidentally, but all jokes aside, there's enough out there that should equip you with being able to go and set up your own LLC and create some basic operating agreement, and that'll give you some protection. So cheap, easy, do it in the state where you're located if kind of the other considerations are a little bit too complex, but that'll wrap you from liability, unless of course you commit fraud or you're kind of rise to that criminal level, and then you can't have the protection of the liability sheet or shield or the corporate veil. So that is the biggest takeaway. But I guess I would also add that a lot of people think that handshake deals or oral agreements are sufficient, and then things go wrong, and those are really difficult to prove in court. So I would still highly recommend deducing things to writing, even if it's email format, and then the other party responds with "I agree" or "I consent," or just drop it into a DocuSign and have them countersign. It doesn't have to be in legal language for it to be enforceable. A lot of people think that everybody in the US has the right to their day in court, but it is really, really, really a painful process. It takes a long time. It takes so much energy out of you. It's super expensive. To find lawyers that would take it on a contingency basis is super difficult. All of these things, that's not really a solid fallback. So putting the effort into the front end or even investing into lawyers at the front end can save you a lot, especially when it comes to something that you own, like or content or art or things that are going into NFT art that's going into NFTs, all sorts of stuff that that you don't want to jeopardize, and somebody who maybe has a deeper legal bench could potentially take away from you. Highly recommend to wrap yourself in a legal entity and put things to paper or in written form and have them kind of countersigned. Super important.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Yev. We've really covered a lot of ground here, and you've provided so much information today for our attendees. And I really hope that we can use this space for some educational content and just continue teaching people how to run their own business. So something we kind of breezed over, I just want to talk about, and I have some attendees that want to come up and ask questions and speak. So I'm going to open the floor to everyone to come up shortly. But really, Launch Legal, I was really curious on like what your inspiration was for getting involved with Launch Legal and what problems you aim to solve.
I feel like I've been speaking a lot. Happy to chat some more. I've been practicing law for 15 years this year. I started practicing at a large international law firm, and then moved around some other large DC firms, and then was in-house as general counsel for a publicly traded company, then a unicorn private aviation startup. So I kind of bounce around in different roles, more traditional roles, and really my vision in hanging my own shingle as a lawyer and setting up my own firm was to break down a lot of kind of this ivory tower access around legal. I think it should be more accessible. I think people should be equipped to do a lot of things, to kind of gather information and be knowledgeable about how to run their companies and what legal protections there are. And so that was really the goal behind Launch Legal, and to provide like a really solid service that was very different to what big law and medium-sized firms provide, which is just more personable and yeah. So that was the goal of Launch Legal, is to really create something that's unique, that breaks down a lot of the barriers for legal access, and then also to concentrate on Web3, which was very unique from a legal perspective as a legal service provider back in 2016. So.
Awesome. And I know that you have been so helpful when it comes to Opolis and just helping the employment commons too, with establishing the legal wrapper and everything. I know you've been a huge help to our team, and we're so grateful for you, Yev. Something I want to touch on before I open up to attendees to join, for all of you in the audience, we have some tweets that we've shared. So some upcoming events we're doing. Next week, we're doing a Freelancer Friday with Panvala League, or Panvala, I'm sorry, and we'll be discussing the communities within Panvala League. So be sure to set a reminder for that. We're also doing a partner spotlight with Talent DAO next week. So I'm really excited for that. We are working on some events for ETH Denver with Talent DAO. So we're actually working to curate a panel on DAOs Beyond the Money at DAO Denver this year. So if you want to join and learn more about that, feel free. And then also we've shared some tweets for Loge Media too. If you are looking for any of these kinds of services to do more marketing and media, anything creative media wise, feel free to check out Loge Media. And Logan, if you want to touch on on the website on how to get involved and how to utilize these services, feel free.
Yeah, definitely. We've tried to make it really accessible for people, not just in our local community, but also outside of our local community as well, to receive quality content. And so if you'd like to, you can just visit loge.media and you can fill out our media request form, so that way you can get more information.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Loj. And the last thing I'll mention, and this is just a way for anyone here, if you want to earn and get involved with Opolis, the main tweet that you should see at the top of this space is how to earn with Opolis. So the first thing I'll point out is the ambassador application. We are actively seeking ambassadors for Opolis, and we actually have one of our lead ambassadors, Stuart, here. So if you apply, you would reach out and or he would reach out to you and set up an interview. We also have our Friends Farming program. So this gives people the opportunity to earn with Opolis. We have what is kind of like a referral program where you refer someone and you can earn $100 in a cash bonus for a qualified lead that schedules a call with one of our membership success stewards, and then an additional $200 cash bonus. And I believe, Josh, we have 1,000 work tokens that are distributed as well, correct?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Cool. So we have the Friends Farming program. And then lastly, like Logan has just done with Loj Media, you can feel free to join the coalition as a partner. So what me and Josh focus on are really Web3 partnerships and nurturing the growth of communities and empowering individuals to become self-sovereign. So if anything we've discussed resonates with you, if you are working in Web3, running your own business, if you need help with compliance, medical, dental, vision, 401k, anything of that nature, feel free to reach out to me or any of the stewards here from Opolis, and we'd be happy to help you. Now, I'm going to open it up because this space had a lot of questions in the background. So I'm going to invite Jacob up, who had a question on some compliance and like state to state questions. What's up, Jacob?
Hello. Yeah, I had a question. Let me I wrote it down because I knew I was gonna forget it. As a resident of California working in the Web3 space, if I'm compensated in shares in a company versus a salary, how can I stay legally compliant? What forms would I need to fill out? And also, what are the pros and cons of being compensated in shares within a company versus a salary, like tax wise? What advantages or disadvantages come with that?
I think this might be a good question for Yev. Yev, if you want to hop in.
Sure. I'm not sure I can answer all aspects of that question from a tax perspective. One thing to be mindful of is filing an 83B election if you qualify. So if you're given restricted stock or stock that is subject to forfeiture in something like a restricted stock purchase agreement, then you should file an 83B election within 30 days of receiving that stock. And then that would kind of set you up for optimal taxation as far as capital gains. And you set the nominal price, especially if you came in early, you set a nominal price. And then whenever you liquidate or sell those shares, then you take advantage of capital gains taxation. So that's one benefit. And, generally, obviously, you take a bet on the company. So if there's a liquidity event or an exit, then potentially your stock will be, you'll get cashed out. There are various compliance notices that need to be filed in California, and the company or the startups council should be doing that for any equity issuances to California residents. So that is pretty important. There are penalties for not filing it on time. It's not necessarily up to you to make that filing, but it's a compliance requirement on the side of the company. But I can't really speak to pros and cons of being paid in cash versus stock, because it just depends on your particular tax situation.
Okay. And I appreciate your answers. It does give me a little bit of a follow-up question too. I've heard of people you know putting their assets in an LLC so that way when they pass away, their assets can be passed down like in a will. I know that Opolis has something within that realm, but I've kind of want to learn more about that in particular, how I can set up my family and the people that I'd want to, in the event that I pass away, that they have something for them.
Yeah. So,
You
go
sorry.
ahead. Yeah.
I was just going to recommend that you probably need to seek some counsel from a wills and trusts attorney, because that's that kind of specialization. But if you have a will, then your assets are not subject to going through government administration, and you can specify exactly how you want to distribute those assets, and with a trust as well. So those are pretty simple to set up. I would say just like a basic will and trust goes a long way.
Yeah, and one other thing I wanted to add. So I'm super grateful for when I joined. I had our membership success stewards walk me through the dashboard and all the things that Opolis offers. And one of the things that's really cool is it offers you life insurance that comes with Opolis. So your membership at Opolis, rather. So I had to select, like, I guess the term beneficiary, or someone that would collect my assets in the event of an emergency. So I really like that they incorporate that into the services and benefits. Yes. Anything, Josh or Yev, you want to include on that I might have missed?
No, that's a good point, though. The insurance policies are another way to protect yourself, and if you want to pass down any kind of legacy onto, or not legacy, but any kind of beneficial something to your descendants. That's another good financial product to look at, and that's a huge perk of Opolis.
So I have one other question, and this one is actually for Josh, coming from an audience member. So Josh, for people trying to find work and partnerships, conventions can often be a great tool. Can you give us some tips and tricks for attendees and hosts on how to better navigate that type of environment?
That is a very broad question that I definitely don't have the definitive answer to. Being present, that's part of winning the battle, showing up. A lot of the industry, crypto, Ethereum, Web3, all of it's all built on, ironically, trust. And we use the tech, but still, for the most part, it's about individuals trusting each other. And so when you meet in person, there's another bond that's formed. Like, I'll meet people or I'll see people who I met at a conference like 2 or 3 conferences ago, and there's this bond that's like, oh man, we met at ETHDenver 2020. And there's a deeper layer to that, and the one is that because of how much hype and absolute trash and scams there are in the space, a lot of people they'll show up for some hype cycle and then they'll leave, right? And it's really difficult to figure out whether you're investing in a relationship that is someone who's here for the revolution, or whether they're here to try to flip NFTs, digital country
So
club bullshit.
true. Seriously, I feel like the bear market has really weeded out the projects that were rooted in hype, and even like contributors and people that were just here, for the good times. I feel like everyone on this space right now is here, as basically facilitators of this financial revolution and energy revolution too, right? Like, we're changing the way that we work, and we're changing the way that our relationship to finances. Go ahead, Josh.
Right, and so the other side of that is go to the event, because you'll make the connections this time, and you never know when that becomes a job offer for next time. So like the people who I met at ETHDenver, who helped me find another role and stay in the ecosystem after being let go from Consensus, a lot of those folks I met for the first time at Osaka like 4 months earlier. So that's one, right? Two is like just show up and participate in a bid-a-thon. So there's a difference in quality of conference between the conferences and events that have a hackathon attached to it versus the ones that are like NFT shill fests. You're not likely to find a role or network with the right people where the incentives are just like price and hype and selling and buying crap. When you go to a Biddle-a-thon, when you go to like ETH Denver, an ETHCC, a DevCon, DevConnect, like the MCon, these quality of events, you're going to be meeting the type of people who are going to help you network, who are going to help you find that role, point you in the right direction.
It's so true. And, something I've said on these spaces before and just in talks with the community is like going to ETH Denver is really a life changing experience. Like, if you go and set intentions and really manifest what you want to get out of that experience, like it happened for Josh, it happened for me. Like, we wanted to take the full time plunge into Web3. And it really is just kind of like, the Super Bowl of Web3 projects. Like, if you are looking to leave your 9 to 5, if you're looking to do more independent work or work on projects in Web3, I feel like that is such a good place to start. I can't think of a better place to start and meet people, seriously. So I want to be mindful of the time. We are getting to the top of the hour here. So is there any closing thoughts, any questions from the attendees, anything from the speakers that you guys would like to share?
I'm just excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me up, Rachel, and thank you, Opolis, for making this all possible.
Awesome. All right, you guys. Well, everyone, if you can, please give all the speakers today a follow. And yeah, just I hope to see you guys at ETH Denver. I hope to see you guys continuing to come up on these Twitter spaces. And I hope you all have an awesome weekend and just do something good for yourself this weekend. And yeah, that's what I'll leave off with. I'm really grateful for each and every one of you that showed up today. And thank you to the speakers.